You've probably heard of Lacan's Rome Discourse. It's the one from 1953, often referred to as the Rome Discourse, the one that later appeared in ECRI as the function and field of speech and language in psychoanalysis. Well, guess what? This is not his only Rome Discourse. In his career, I count 3. The first, indeed, was this 1953 lecture that effectively became the manifesto of Lacanian psychoanalysis in the mid-1950s. The second of his 3 Rome discourses, though, occurs about 10 years later in 1967, and it had a more provocative title, one which, in light of what we're about to get into, I'm inclined to translate as Psychoanalysis, Reason for Failure. But it's Lacan's third Rome discourse that concerns us here, because it wasn't until his third Rome discourse in 1974 that, if you ask me, he pulled out all the stops. Though you wouldn't guess this from our boy's choice of title, La Troisième, which simply means the third. But don't let this title fool you, my friends. Yes, this was Lacan's third Rome discourse, but that's not why he called it the third. The third at stake in this key text from his later teaching was not his return to Rome, but the reason why he came back. To discuss the third register of analytic theory and technique, which is also the third dimension of human being for Lacan, the real. The register and the dimension on which Lacan now wagers the entire future of his enterprise, psychoanalysis itself, and in no ambiguous terms. The future of psychoanalysis, he tells us, depends on what becomes of the real. But even to call the real Lacan's third register or dimension is a bit misleading. As we learned in Seminar 21, and definitely check out our lectures on Seminar 21. If you haven't seen these yet, they're wild. I mean, this text was just all over the place, but we managed to stitch it together. The discussions were fabulous, absolutely fabulous. If you were there, you know. If you weren't, you at least have access to the recordings of the lectures. We learned a lot in Seminar 21 through just a handful of really crystallized passages. A lot of what we learned centered on the question of thirdness, the thirdness of the real relative to symbolic and imaginary. And one of the things we learned in there was that cardinality, not ordinality, is what matters here. In other words, it's about the quantity of the registers, not any sequential ordering of them, that matters to Lacan at this point. There's no first came, second appeared, and last arrived in Lacan's conception of real, symbolic, and imaginary. It's their count as 3, their triplicity, as he puts it in Seminar 21, that matters to him. And the essay we're considering here now, the lecture turned essay, is delivered just a few months after Lacan concludes Seminar 21. So it's relevant to keep us on this point. Here's also why I think the Borromean knot, which really isn't much of a knot, it's more like a braid if you want to think about it, but here's why it still matters so much for Lacan. He returns again and again in this period to the Borromean knot. You see it on your screen right now, taken straight from his third Rome discourse. And by the way, this is the easier of the two Borromean knots that he draws in there. We're going to go through it all. We'll get there one step at a time. But for now, just note, he loves the Borromean knot because all three registers are there at once. Our text shows him working this love out again and again with additions, subtractions, and revisions. And in so doing, it may seem like Lacan is all over the place, rattling from topic X to topic Y and back to topic C, D, But listen, throughout La Troisième, he is laser focused on this topology. This topology on your screen, in and as which real, symbolic, and imaginary are knotted together. But again, even to say that they're knotted together isn't quite right. Now, if you could imagine taking any one or two or three of these rings and pulling them outward, you would indeed create a knot, a really tightened area of overlap, not just an intersection, not just a node, but a knot. So yeah, I guess you could say there's a knot of sorts here. But let me be real clear about this. My understanding is that mathematicians have no fucking idea what a knot is. It's kind of like asking a biologist what life means. Lacan thinks he gets it, but ask a biologist and watch the smoke come out of their ears. I'm trained as a communication scholar. Ask me what communication is and watch me stammer. You see? Usually with mathematicians, you think, ask them what a number is, and they'll fall apart. Here, though, I think it's worth noting that in the mathematical branch of topology, I don't think anybody has a clue what a knot is. Again, though, Lacan thinks he gets it. The knot in question, in the image on your screen of this Borromean link, is really more like a braid, you've heard me say. I think this thing works as simply as braiding hair. And I know about this. I'm an expert in braiding hair at this point, because it's one of the favorite moments in my day as a dad, is braiding my kiddos' hair before bed. And let me tell you one of the things I learned along the way. If you remove any one strand of hair in a braid, the braid falls apart. So also with Lacan's Borromean knot. If any one of the registers is missing, the rest fall apart. No three, no two, no one together. Now, if you ask me, I think this is another way of arriving at that squirrely axiom we've been working with for a while now in lectures on Lacan. And it goes something like this. In order to have something of the one, there must always already be two at play. So, one pen and the hand it is not. One hand and the face it is not. One face and the voice it is not. And where two have gathered, our axiom continues, there will always already be three. There's the pen, there's the hand, and then there's their differential relation, which is neither pen nor hand, but a third element, irreducible to either. What Lacan, in Seminar 21, just before his third Rome discourse, defines as their irremediable division. And the same logic holds for hands, faces and voices, and so on. It's this third element which marks an irremediable division between any two requisite to the production of any one that Lacan invites us to consider in his third Rome discourse. Let me ask you a question. Is this third element, this irremediable division, this non-rapport that we're discussing between any two, is it equivalent to the real? No. But it brings us right to that motherfucker's doorstep, right to the doorstep of the real, allowing us to touch upon it, as Lacan often puts it at this point in his thought. And this, I would argue, is precisely what makes a psychoanalysis Lacanian. We start with something of the one. Call it narcissistic love. We then decipher it into two unconscious truths, let's say. One that can be said and known, but another, far vaster, which cannot be said, and thus remains unknown. And then, third move here, between these two aspects of, let's call it unconscious truth, we count three, allowing irremediable division to sally forth. Call it the sexual relationship, which is no such thing. This, I think, is what Lacan means in Le Tourdi when he says the job of psychoanalysis is to hold a place for the real. But remember, it's a place held for the real just until something better comes along. So let me ask you another question here. What's better than narcissistic love, deciphered into unconscious truth, in the furrows of which we encounter irremediable division on the edge of the real? What's better than this is learning to love all this in ourselves and our relationships with others alike, if we can call them that. Between the non-rapport I am and the non-rapport you are is a non-rapport we share, in which your half-sayings and mine do not overlap, cannot overlap, never shall overlap, much to our mutual delight. I think this is what makes for true love letters, namely non-correspondence. The success of a true love letter, it seems to me, depends on its failure to deliver. Which is why I cannot say how much I love you. Words fail. These especially, for they are not it. So I ask you, again and again, to refuse this offering. And if you think this carries us too far afield, in a lecture series dedicated to psychoanalytic theory and technique, think again, my friends, and do so by thinking back to seminar 19B or worse. I got a quick passage from there I want to share with you. You can recall it from our series on seminar 19B, or you can just listen now. Who can fail to see the fundamental character of a concatenation such as this for the analytic discourse? I once said long ago, and there are some who still find it soothing, that an analysis ends only when someone can say, not, I speak to you, nor I speak of me, but it's from me that I speak to you. That was a first sketch. Is it not clear that the discourse of the analysand is grounded precisely on this? I ask you to refuse me my offering, because this isn't it. This is the fundamental request. And it's the same request that the analyst renders that much heavier when he neglects it. I got lots of questions this morning. Here's another one. What would it mean to heed this request instead of neglecting it? In many ways, I think this is exactly what analytic inquiry means to Lacan at this point in the fall of 1974 when he's delivering his third Rome discourse. Let me hit you with this again. We start with something of the one, an imaginary construct that purports to hang together, only to realize that, in fact, what appears to be one is multiple. So check it out. Beneath the imaginary cipher of oneness, singularity, coherence, and the like, we find, by way of interpretation, differential binary logics of presence and absence, ones and their negations, the structure of which is unconscious and, for this reason, symbolic. From images of oneness to dimensions of deciphering, that's the move we're talking about here. Something of the one deciphered into two. And you know what's at stake for Lacan in these differential binary fields, of course. Between any given two, he's always going to count three. A three which cannot be reduced to either element in this dyad, whose reduction to either one, let me be clear, is impossible. We decipher the universe to the point of irremediable difference. Now, we've been over all this before, and at great length, especially in our series on Seminar 20, Television, Seminar 21, so let me just keep this as pointed as possible, saying it yet again, and hopefully better than the last. Narcissistic love is an imaginary figure of the one that offers us a point of access to a differential symbolic field of unconscious truth, that offers us a point of access to irremediable division on the edge of the real. Or, put a bit more starkly, in psychoanalysis, love leads us to truth, and truth leads us to the real. As easy as 1, 2, 3, but only so long as you count them all at once. All at once, indeed. All at onceness. This, for me, is a terrific way to understand Lacan's Borromean knot. It's a planar topology, to be sure, a written, flattened spatialization of what he now understands as the three dimensions of human being, by which, of course, he means speaking being. But there's a temporal logic at work here as well, an evental, kairotic, all-at-onceness. And as Lacan goes on to show in his second major Borromean diagram in this lecture turned essay that we're considering here, this motherfucker is alive, pulsing, breathing life. You see, each register in the diagram on your screen, in the Borromean knot as Lacan draws it in the fall of 1974, is capable of extending its reach into the others. Imagine one of these rings growing larger, and you'll see what I mean. Each register is capable of extending its reach into the others, but then also in turn of having its own reach scaled back when one of the others extends its. Think of it as simply as breathing. When one register inhales, expanding outward, another exhales, decreasing in size. Okay, you start getting me talking about breath, much as we did in our series on the drive, and I damn near find myself on the edge myself. Let's not get too far ahead. It's not until the end of Lacan's third Rome discourse that he starts getting into all this, suggesting what it might mean for one or the other of these rings to extend its reach, or to have it shrunk. So where should we begin then? I told you Lacan is all over the place in this thing, but laser focused on that Borromean knot. What's our point of entry? I think we should begin the same place that analytic inquiry begins, with the imaginary, specifically with imaginary fixations of and on the one. We start, once again, with something of the one. An illusion of wholeness, completion, consistency, singularity, and the like, that the imaginary, more than the other registers, is uniquely suited to sustain. Call it a narrative. I'm here, dear analyst, because I had an awful childhood. I'm here, dear analyst, because my husband is an alcoholic. Because I am not getting the love I want. Call something of the one an ailment. I'm an anxious person. It's really his OCD. It's hertism that gets to me. Oh, really? You try finding love on the spectrum, dear analyst. Call it a name. That's really what something of the one is. You motherfucker. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Just like my dad used to. In each case, we see something of the one at work. A narrative, an ailment, a name that simplifies complexity, singularizes the multiple, universalizes the particular, and recall what we mean by universalizes, to turn into one. Anytime Lacan uses the word universe, and he uses it in a really key passage in our essay, he refers back to its etymology as turning into one. The universe is something we make. It's a fabrication. It is an illusion of oneness. Which is why, again, we call it something of the one. Yadlu. What we learn in La Troisième about the one, or something thereof, is that the foremost illusion of oneness in your life and mine is that of the body, yours and mine alike. But note, Lacan is not talking about the body itself as a raw, wriggling, polymorphous materiality. What he means when he says the foremost illusion of oneness, and by extension our first foray into the universe, is that of the human body, what he means is that it's the image of the human body, the image of one's own body. It's the specular image of one's own body that gives us something of the one in the imaginary. And with it, a certain point of access to the economy of jouissance, as Lacan calls it here. And with that, we are into our text. Let me share some passages with you. How'd you do yours? Here's mine. I put it in a binder here. Page 50 to 52 of our text. And I hope you found this text useful, with 2 French versions and 3 English translations. Makes it all easy having it all right here. Many thanks to Freud, to Lacan for this. But back to our body here. I'm reading starting on about page 50 of our text. I want to share with you some passages to give you a sense of how Lacan is setting this up, this something of the one that is the image of the body. The body enters the economy of jouissance through the image of the body. That was my starting point. If there is something that clearly underlines that the relation of man, or what goes under his name, to his body is imaginary, it is the importance taken on by his image. At the outset, I underlined clearly that there must be a reason for this in the real. Only prematuration explains it. I didn't come up with it. It was bulk. I never sought to be original. I sought to be a logician. Note that. Lacan never sought to be an original, he says. His goal was only to be a logician. This preference for the image, he continues, stems from the fact that man anticipates his bodily maturation, with all that this implies, namely, that he cannot see one of his counterparts without thinking that his counterpart is taking his place, and so naturally he loathes him. Why is man so in thrall to his image? The trouble I took at a certain time to explain that, naturally you didn't notice. Now, this is interesting, but I also say it's a little weird, man. What does he mean we didn't notice? Are you kidding me? It's damn near the only thing that folks seem to have noticed about Lacan's work, the fucking mirror stage. We didn't notice? Now listen, I don't mean to shit on the mirror stage. We don't have time to rehearse it here, though, so I'm not going to say too much more. Nor do I think it's even necessary for us to rehearse it, given how much notice folks have taken of it over the past 75 years or so. 75 years and counting, really. I only cue it up here to explain why Lacan writes core, C-O-R-P-S, in the imaginary in his first significant advancement of the Borromean knot in the text we're considering. You can see it on your screen right now. In the imaginary ring, red, he writes corps, C-O-R-P-S, the French word for body. You can see it on page 77 of our readings as well. Let me emphasize this again. It's in the imaginary, not in the real, that we see the body, yours and mine alike. Because it's the image of the body, more than the lived experience of being one, that fascinates us. Indeed, there's a key distinction here, which is partly why Lacan, just after accusing his audience of neglecting his early work on specular imaginaries, returns to the topic with which his lecture began: non-human animals. Locusts, sticklebacks, pigeons, and from there he's on to plants. Do you remember the shrimp in Seminar 16? How about the beavers and the oysters of Seminar 17? There were some plants in there as well. And how about the biblical tree at the end of Seminar 21? You see, that shit ain't about Adam. That shit ain't about Eve. It ain't even about the analytic snake, if you recall those lectures. It's about the tree of prohibition. This is what catches Lacan's eye. The list goes on. I'm just naming a few instances here. But Lacan's question in each case, and here as well, is precisely the same. Do they enjoy? Do plants and non-human animals enjoy? And if so, what do they enjoy? Lacan says we can't answer these questions. But it doesn't stop him from speculating. And this, on my reading, is one of the most interesting parts of his third Rome discourse. If the plant enjoys, Lacan guesses, it probably enjoys itself. Same with non-human animals. They know how to enjoy themselves. I think this is what Lacan is up to at his lecture's start when talking about cats. And you may have read the series description that got us to this point. It was this shit on cats that caught my attention right out of the gates. If I'm not mistaken, the fun begins on page 7 when he starts considering the purr. The purr, it's without a doubt the jouissance of a cat. What passes through its larynx, or whatever when I stroke it, I don't know anything about it myself, seems to be passing through its whole body. And it's this that's brought me to where I want to begin. I will begin from here. This doesn't give you, strictly speaking, the rules of the game, but these will come later. I think, therefore, it enjoys itself. It discards the usual therefore that says to itself, je suis. And note this clever shift here. From je suis to se jouit. We'll come back to it in a minute. Let's keep talking about cats. Can we just talk about cats? I'm looking at one right now. It's not my favorite cat. I do have favorites. I'm looking at the one now. She's a little fucker. My favorite cat, I don't know where she is. If she comes out, I'll hold her up. The little fucker that you heard about, Lucifer. Where'd you go now? All right, anyway. You heard about Lucifer. You met her in Seminar 16. I don't know, maybe you'll meet the other one, Preach. Oh, you can meet Preach this time? We'll see. This one purrs, and it's one of those loud purrs. This is a purr that'll rattle your coffee cup right off the damn table. Cats. If they enjoy, Lacan speculates, it's not the image of their bodies that they enjoy, but instead the lived, corporal, wildly material experience of being just that, a body, encore, with a space between the N and the C. Don't forget that. The core in question here has a space between the N and the C. It is always an encore, an in-body experience. The cat, let me be clear, enjoys itself without mediation through an image. And don't miss the renewed critique of the Cartesian subject in all of this. I think, therefore I am, Descartes wagered. And what am I again? Why, I am me. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I think, therefore I am is on the chopping block at the start of Lacan's third Rome discourse, as it has often been in his work. In response to Descartes' I think, therefore I am, Lacan offers I think, therefore it enjoys itself. And again, note the French here. Where the Cartesian je suis was, the Lacanian se jouit becomes. Or again, so our boy speculates. He can't say for sure about any of this, but damn if he isn't determined to keep meditating on it here. Let me show you another passage, just a little bit past the last one we read on the image of the body. I'm clocking this thing at about page 54 to 55 of our reading. Here it is. What's striking is this. If there's something that gives us the idea of enjoying itself, it's the animal. There's no proof, but anyway, it seems to be implied by what is called the animal body. The question becomes interesting at this point, if we generalize it, and if in the name of life, we wonder if a plant can enjoy. Still, this is something that has meaning, since this is at any rate where they pulled the old lilies of the field trick on us. They do not weave or spin, they added. But certainly we cannot now be satisfied with this for the good reason that it's precisely their business to spin and to weave. For us, who look at this down a microscope, there's no more obvious example than this of a yarn. And again, note the French here. It's kind of an interweaving thing that he's working on. So it may be this that they enjoy, weaving and spinning, but that still leaves the whole thing up in the air. The question remains to be determined as to whether life involves jouissance. And if that question remains doubtful for the vegetable, then that only makes it even more pertinent that it is not for speech. That la langue, where jouissance creates a sediment. So let me ask yet another question here. The same question that Lacan's been asking for a while. Do shrimp, beavers, oysters, trees, plants, the list goes on, do they enjoy? Again, we can't say for certain, but we can sure talk about all this, which is proof enough that we, unlike them, surely do enjoy. Lacan becomes explicit about this as his third Rome discourse winds to a close. The jouissance of plants and animals, he says, is impossible to imagine. It is, in short, unimaginable. I think this is why. If you look closely at his culminating Borromean knot on page 79 of our text, you see that he has written life in the ring he labels real. And I know we're at the start of things, but I can't resist putting us at the very end of this text that we're working on here. If you got a willingness to jump forward, meet me on page 8, or just listen because it fits well with what we're talking about here. How did I come to write the word life at the level of the circle of the real? And to help us out here, I'm just going to write it here as well. Life is now written in the circle of the real. Now, Lacan in the diagram we have, it's still in French. I'm just translating it into English. So note this. You've got life in the circle of the real, core, body in the circle of the imaginary. Lacan knows this is squirrely. So he's going to try and answer the question, how and why am I writing life at the level of the circle of the real? It is because, apart from this vague expression that consists in speaking of enjoying life, we clearly know nothing about life. This chemical construction of elements dispersed in I don't know what, and in a way that we would like to qualify, that all of a sudden began building a molecule of DNA, according to the laws of science, how did it ever get started? Everything that science leads us to deduce shows that there is nothing more real than that, which means that there is nothing more impossible to imagine. Note again how sharp a distinction we have here between the human body and the animal body. We can't help but imagine the human body, but the animal body, teeming with life, like a purring cat, is unimaginable to us.